Alright, and welcome to this lesson where we're going to continue on developing the dashboard. So now we have the graph up and running. What I want to do is then load in the actual points of the graph through JSON. Instead of having it just as an array of numbers inside of JavaScript, we want this an array of numbers inside of JSON, and then we're going to load it in, and then the graph will display the data. So inside of the JSON directory, we now have graph.php. So let's take a look at that PHP file first of all. So here we have the PHP file, and it's an array with one object inside of it, and inside of there we have one property, which is going to be info, and then we have an array full of numbers. Again, you could have, for example, all the color schemes, you could have multiple data sets and all the rest of it, but again, I'm just going to keep things real simple so you can see how the process works. So now that I have this graph.php with the values for my data points, I now want to make my graph dynamic via JavaScript. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to first of all target jQuery, and then we're going to say, right, we want to call the getJSON method, which, as you know, will fetch the JSON file. So that's the first parameter, is where is this JSON file. So we're going to go up out the current directory into the JSON directory, and then we're going to take a look at the graph.php file. Then once we have that file, it's going to call back a function, and the first argument that's passed in is the data. Now I don't really want to get this confused with this property name down here, so what I want to do is just give this the name of info, for example. Again, all it is a variable that's storing the data that is being converted from JSON and now is a JavaScript array full of objects, full of properties and values. And then what we can do is start to pass that information out. So when we have this function right here, then we want to run all of this code. So I'm literally going to cut out all of this code because there's no point in running any of this code until we have that information. So I'm just going to paste that in just like so. And then what I can do is I can take a look at this data variable right here. And obviously we no longer just want to have an array full of numbers here in JavaScript. We want to obviously take that array full of numbers from the JSON information that has been provided. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say info, which is targeting that array, and then we have our first object. So we need to look inside of our first object in the array. So the way you do that is in your square brackets you say 0. Very important that you do that. And so now we're looking inside of this object, and now we can take a look at the properties of that object, which of course we want the info property. So I'm just going to say .info, and that's it. That's all I have to do. I can save this now and pull it up in the browser, and I can just hit refresh, and there you go. And if I was to change this data, so for example, let's change this to 20 to prove that this is actually loading in from JSON, just hit refresh, and now you'll notice that's gone up to 20. So now that we have a dynamic chart, and again that's for all the different versions, what I want to do is take a look at the two bottom boxes right here and put that data in. So first of all, we're going to need to go to the dashboard.php file, and then underneath there we need to put in the DOM elements. So firstly, I'm going to create a div element with the ID of col wrap, and this contains the two div elements that are our two main boxes, and the first div element is going to have the ID of col notes, and then inside of there we want the header1 element, and this is going to be notifications, and then what I want to do is below there put in the anchors right here, so we have the notification from who it was sent, and then we have a little bit of a summary of the notification below. So let's put in an anchor first of all, and that's just going to link to nowhere. And then what I want to do is put in the strong tag and just say John Smith. Let's say that's the sender of the notification. Then we want a line break inside of there, and then just have a little bit of a summary of that notification, and we can just copy this and paste it in twice, and then I can just collapse that. Alright, so that is col notes done with. Now the next thing I want to do is take a look at the second div element, our second box, and that's going to have the ID col events. Then inside of there I want the header 1 that's going to say events. Then what I want to do is take a look at putting in the unordered list, and this unordered list right here is again part of our UI component set, and it's very similar to the left hand side navigation found on the notifications page right here. So again, it's slightly different in its styling, but overall it's going to be the same markup, and then we're just going to modify it especially for the dashboard page. So what I want to do is create an unordered list with the class of UI_nav list. Then inside of there we're going to have a list item. Then inside of the list item we're going to have an anchor, and currently it's going to link to nowhere. Then inside of there we want the image, and the image is going to be the small_profile.jpg image, and then we're just going to put in the alt attribute, which will be the person's name. And then what I want to do is take a look at the paragraph, and the paragraph is going to has the strong tag inside of it, which is the title of the event. Then it has a line break, and then below there we just have a brief description of that event. So now that we've gone ahead and done that, let's go and copy this list item twice. So then we have 3 exactly. And then I can just save that, and then I can go ahead and refresh that in the browser, just like so. And we can move over to the SCSS file and get everything styled up so it renders correctly, because currently we have a big mess right here. So what I want to do is start out with the div with the ID of col wrap, and I want to first of all set it to display as a table element. Then what I want to do is set the width to 100%, and then what I want to do is put on a little bit of padding right here. So the padding is going to be 0 on the top, because don't forget that with the events view box right here we have a 35 pixel margin on the bottom. So that's automatically put that 35 pixel spacing in there for us. But then we need to make sure that there's a 35 pixel spacing on all the other edges. So I'm just going to say 35 pixels except for the top. And then what I want to do is put in the box sizing, because don't forget we set the width to 100% and we've included the padding to the left and to the right, and so that means that we want to include that padding in the width. So we just say @include box sizing. And so once you've done that, go ahead and save this now, and it should look a little bit better. And so now that we've done that, we now need to focus on our 2 div elements, or 2 boxes inside of here, which is notifications and events. And so what I want to do first of all is target both those elements. So I want to target col wrap and then target the div elements that are nested inside of there. And then what I want to do is tell them to display as a table cell. And then once I've told them to display as a table cell, I can set the width to 50%. That way they're going to keep the same height as one another, which is good. Now don't forget that with these table cells we want the background color to be set to cream, and so again I'm being very specific right here, and you'll see why later on, but I'm just setting the background color. So let's hit refresh. So now you'll notice that obviously I set the parent to the table, I have the table cells, they have 50% width, so they stack up side by side, and now you can see how this is all working. But right now you can see here that this is looking sort of like the layout that we want. So now what I want to do is take a look at the notifications box right here and get everything styled up, and then I'll move on to the events box. So what I'm going to do is target the element with the ID col notes, and then we're going to set the padding right to 35 pixels. And so what this will allow me to do is push the contents away from the events box right here. But there is a bit of a problem, because what I've done here is set the padding. Now even if you set the margin it won't create a gap, so I had to go with padding, but you'll notice that it has the background color of cream right there. We want a nice white 35 pixel gap going down on the y-axis. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to use an image, but I'm not going to use it in the conventional way that you normally would by targeting an image. I'm actually going to convert it into a data URI so I can use it in line with my CSS. So if you're not sure what it is, don't worry about it, because what we're going to do is take a look inside of the dashboard directory, and you'll notice we have the divider.png. This is a very simple image, and what I want to do is put it through a converter. So if you take a look at this converter that's here, it's again free, and there's loads of tools available online. It's called websemantics.co.uk, online tools / image to data URI converter. And what I can do is upload an image, so I can browse, select my divider.png image, open it up, and then tell it to convert the image into its raw data format. Now again, this may seem very cool, and if you've never seen it before, it's quite easy. All it is it's taking the image and putting it in its raw format, so then you can literally use this raw data, which is effectively a string that is a base64 encoded string, and we're giving it a bit of metadata right here, telling it that this data represents an image that's in the PNG format, and so on and so forth. And then you can use that in the CSS, or you could use it in the image element in the source attribute. So again, this may seem like a very good idea, which in our case it is a good idea, but don't go crazy with this, because the problem is if you have a very, very large image, you're going to want the compression of JPEG and PNG and so forth. This is in its raw data, so it's not compressed at all, really. So that's why, I always recommend that you only use this in strenuous circumstances, such as, for your layout and everything else, and if the image isn't very big, which in our case, our image is extremely simple. So what I'm going to do is copy this out, and then I want to take a look at the SCSS file again, and now I want to set the background image, which is why I was specific here with the coloring. I didn't want the styles to conflict. So that's the background color. Now I'm going to set the background image, and it's going to be a URL, and instead of course this being an actual URL that targets an image, it's going to be the data URI. So that's my raw data. I'm just going to end with a semicolon, and then we need to set the repeat value. So I'm going to say background -repeat, and I'm going to tell it to repeat on the y-axis, so it's going down like so. And then what I want to do is set the position of the background image, which is going to be the top right. So it's going to be all the way over to the right edge, right at the top, going downwards. So I can save this now, and I can hit refresh, and now you'll notice we have that nice little gap, and we're not relying on any image right here for the layout of our page. Now yes, it does make the columns a little bit uneven, because obviously this one's -35 pixels, but I feel that this box right here needs more space just because it's got an image inside of there. This is just simple text, and so that's why I've gone with this one being a little bit smaller. So what I'm going to do right now is go ahead and start to style up all of these anchors that are inside of my notifications box. So I'm first of all going to target col wrap, and then I'm going to target all the anchors that are inside of there. So that's actually targeting all of these anchors, because all of these anchors have the same sort of styles. Even though these anchors are pretty much styled up, I'm just making this very generic to save time. And so what I want to do is display as a block level element first of all, so I can give this mass, and the mass is going to be 100% of the parent's width. Then I want to set the padding to 20 pixels to keep the contents away from the edges, stopping this from happening right here. And then what I want to do is set the line height to 160%, so we have a nice bit of spacing with our lines. Then also I'm going to set the color to text 1, so that'll be the brown text color, which will cause problems right here, but don't worry about that box for now. Then also I'm going to set the font size to 16 pixels, so we're just being very specific. Then also I'm going to set the border bottom to 1 pixel solid, and it's going to be the light grey color. As you can see in the Photoshop version, they're all divided up by a little tiny grey line. So what I want to do is include the box sizing mix-in, and that's because, don't forget, we set the width to 100% and the padding to 20 pixels. I don't want it to go outside of the boundaries of the parent, and therefore I use the box sizing mix-in. Then after that I'm going to use the transition mixing, because I want a nice animation, and again it's already set up on the right hand side, but for our notifications box right here we're gonna have to set it up. So I just want to transition the background property in 0.3 of a second, and then I'm just going to end it. And then what I want to do is just copy that selector and put in the hover state, and the only difference I want is the fact that I want the background color to go to yellow. So I'm just going to say background, and then I'm just going to say yellow. We can just refresh and take a look at this. So obviously we do have a little bit of a problem right here, but these guys are styled up. So the next thing I want to do is move on and take a look at styling the events box. So join me in the next lesson where we'll continue on developing the dashboard.